Welcome back to my channel, Patronosaurus Reads. I'm Katie, aka Patronosaurus, and I read. Welcome to the second in my series of end of 2019 videos. These are going to be the books that surprised me the most this year, so books that I had low to middling expectations for that I ended up really liking or even loving. So again, I have 10. I wanted it to just be like a nice round number, so let's go. My number 10 most surprising book was Her Royal Highness by Rachel Hawkins. This is the second book in the, I don't know what the series is called, but it's a series about like royal people falling in love with normal people. And this one follows this American girl who goes to a very elite boarding school in Scotland, and her roommate turns out to be the princess, who is a little prickly, and then they end up being not so prickly, and turns out that she actually has a crush on the main character, and they like start a relationship, and it was super cute. It's very much like a teen female version of Red, White, and Royal Blue, so if you like that book, I think that you will really enjoy Her Royal Highness as well. It's got a lot of that like enemies slash rivals to lovers type thing, which, as we all know, is a trope that absolutely slaps. So I didn't really love Prince Charming, which is the first book in that series, which is why I was not expecting to like Her Royal Highness, but I really liked it. The next book that really surprised me this year was The Kiss Quotient by Helen Hoang, which like hit BookTube and like the world in general by storm, I'm pretty sure, but I was a little bit behind the times because I think it came out in 2018. And this is an adult romance novel that follows a woman on the autism spectrum who is very uncomfortable around relationships and sex. So she hires an escort to like teach her how to have sex, basically, and like to be comfortable. And then a relationship blossoms from there, as it is a romance book. And I think this is like one of the first romance books I read. Like I basically didn't read romance before this year. Like I know that I've read a lot on my channel, because I think I read The Kiss Quotient in like the spring, like March or April or something. So it was before I started my channel. So as long as y'all have known me, it's like, oh yeah, Katie reads romance and smut. But that is actually a very new development for me, so that's why this book was so surprising to me, because I had like never touched the genre before, basically. And I was so impressed. I really liked it. I love the diversity and the representation, and the writing itself was really good. The relationship I thought was well written, and I just enjoyed it a lot. And that like kind of opened my eyes to this whole genre that I had never really read before, so that's awesome. My number 8 most surprising book of the year was The Outsiders by S.E. Hinton. So I know a lot of people read this in school, but I never did. So I was actually reading it along with my students for the first time. If you're unaware, I taught 8th grade after I graduated college for 1 year, and then I stopped doing that, and now I'm doing something else. So last year I was teaching, and I taught this book, because that's what the curriculum was. Like I didn't have to teach it, but that's what the other 8th grade teachers taught, so I was like, whatever, I'll just do that and like use their materials and get advice from them, blah blah. And I really enjoyed this book, and now I see why it is such a popular book for students to be reading in middle school, maybe like freshman year of high school. It does a really good job of introducing themes of like society setting people up to fail and being set up against certain groups, hence the outsiders. And everyone not really being that different, and being able to relate to people that are in other groups than you if you just stop and talk to them. It's just really good, especially as an introduction to these themes. Like 13-year-olds are not thinking very, I was gonna say sophisticatedly, but I don't know if that's a word, but their brains are still cooking, you know? So they need things laid out to them pretty cut and dry. And I thought that this book did a really good job with doing that and showing these themes, and I think it was well written for what it is, a book for middle schoolers, the book that basically created the young adult genre, so shout out to that. Yeah, I ended up liking it a lot. And my number 7 most surprising book of the year was The Vanishing Star by Maureen Johnson, which is the second book in the Truly Devious mystery trilogy. Oh my god. Book 3 comes out like next week. Sorry, I just had a moment. I'm pretty excited. So this is a mystery series that follows like dual timelines. There's a mystery in the 1930s at this really elite boarding school. Wow, read some elite boarding school books this year apparently. And there was this kidnapping and murder that happened in the 1930s that was never really solved. Like the general consensus is that the person who was convicted for the crime didn't actually do it. And then the school is still open now in modern times, and the main character, Stevie, her special thing is true crime. Like all the kids who go to the school have like a thing. They're like musicians, artists, writers, movie stars in the making, like stuff like that. So Stevie's thing is detective work, and her big project is that she wants to solve this case that happened in the 1930s. But then there's like weird things going on in her timeline and mysteries that need to be solved. So the reason this book was surprising to me was because I didn't dislike the first book by any means. I gave Truly Devious 4 stars. Like I still really enjoyed that book, but there were quite a few things about the pacing and the structure that felt very much like a first book. Like it took a lot of time to get things set up and introducing characters and all this stuff, and I wish that it had been done a little bit more gracefully. But once all that stuff was set up, then in this book, in book 2, The Vanishing Star just like took off running, and it was incredible. I was hooked. Like it was awesome. I mean, you just saw me have a moment about book 3. I already have my hold set at the library, but I might just pre-order a copy. I don't know. I have decisions to make, but I'm very excited to finish the trilogy, especially because Vanishing Star left me desperate. My number 6 most surprising book of the year was A Lesson in Thorns by Sierra Simone, which I mentioned in my most disappointing books as well, because the second book in that series was disappointing. That's a spoiler for that video if you haven't watched it already. I will link it over there and down there if you want to watch me gripe about some books. But this book was very good. I thought, like, it's a smut book, if you can't tell by the cover and the literal boobs that are on it. But I thought that there was a really good balance between the actual plot, and it's also kind of a mystery, following these group of friends who, when they were kids, all went up to like one of the family's estates and like hung out there and did stuff and had like some very strong bonding experience, and then they all come back as adults and are reunited and are trying to like solve some mysteries of them and their family's past and blah blah blah. And then they also have like a lot of sex together, which, if that's your thing, like fun to read about. I was watching Chelsea from Chelsea Darling Reads. She was giving her TBR for Smutathon, which I think was like this past week, and she had a Sierra Simone book on there, and she said when Sierra Simone gets it right, she really gets it right, but when she gets it wrong, it's like really bad. I have found that to be my experience as well. I have liked a lot of the Sierra Simone that I've read, but I've also disliked quite a bit of the Sierra Simone that I have read, sometimes even in the same series, as evidenced by the fact that book 1 is in this video and book 2 was in my most disappointing reads video. So my number 5 most surprising book was Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. So I had read all of Riley Sager's books previous to this one, and they were fine. The other 2, I thought they were just okay mysteries. I wasn't in love with them, and I think that had so much to do with the setting. I love a creepy house setting, and Lock Every Door delivers. It is about this, I was gonna say girl, she's not a girl, she's a woman. This woman who is down on her luck in New York City, and she sees an advertisement to apartment sit, basically, in this very famous, very fancy apartment building. And they have some weird rules, like you have to stay the night every single night, you can't go somewhere else, you can't have guests over, like nothing like that. But she's like, you know what, I really need somewhere to live and they're gonna pay me, like, yes, let's do it. And she makes friends with one of the other apartment sitters, and then they're supposed to meet for lunch the next day, and the other girl never shows up. So then the main character is trying to solve the mystery of what happened to this woman, and the building itself, it's called the Bartholomew, it has such a strong presence, and it is a character of itself within this book, which is so tasty. Like, it's so creepy, a little bit of a haunted house vibe. Like, it's not actually haunted, there are no supernatural elements in this book, but it was so like, it was so good. My number 4 most surprising book of the year was Well Met by Jen DeLuca. This book is about this woman, what is her name? I actually have the book in front of me. Emily. Her name is Emily. So her sister got into a car accident, so she moves in with her sister and her niece to kind of help assist them while her sister is getting back on her feet and take care of her niece. And the niece wants to be in the town's Renaissance fair, but because she's under 16, she has to have an adult sign up to do it with her. So because the mom has a broken leg, Emily says, okay, I'll do it with you. So she goes, and she's like kind of not taking it seriously. And then the guy who runs it, Simon, his name is Simon, not Ben. The guy who runs it, Simon, he's like very uptight about it. He like wants everybody to do everything perfectly, blah, blah, blah. So they don't like each other. Except then, when the Renaissance Fair actually starts, his character, a pirate, is in a relationship with her barmaid character. So then it starts like blurring the lines of what is real, what's fake. Is she really attracted to him, or is it just the pirate personality? What does she actually feel? What does he actually feel? It's very much like these rivals to lovers type thing, which is good. I wish it had a little bit more of the build-up, because that's what I want in every rivals or enemies to lovers book ever. I want more of the tension. Like, that's what I'm here for at all times. But I don't know, I just wasn't expecting this to be as good as it was. I thought it would be like a cute 3-star romance, and it ended up being 4 stars, like almost perfect for me. And I should have known, because it's very nerdy and I love this like nerdy shit, but it was so unexpectedly delightful. Like, I bought a physical copy. Like, I knew that I needed to actually have this because that's how much I like this book. So if that sounds interesting to you at all, I would highly recommend you read it because it was so cute and so good. Okay, we're getting into my top 3 now. The number 3 most surprising book of 2019 was No Exit by Taylor Adams. So this is another mystery / thriller book. It's much more of a thriller than a mystery, which I think I've mentioned before, about this girl named Darby who unexpectedly has to go home over her college's winter break. She wasn't planning on it, but her mom is having surgery, so she decides to drive home to be with her mom in the hospital. And she stops at this rest stop in the middle of this terrible storm, and she can't leave. Like, the storm is too bad, the highway that she's on is too twisty, it will not be safe for her to drive. So she's staying at this rest stop. She is interacting with like the handful of other people there. She goes outside to make a phone call to like talk to her sister about her mom, and she sees a little girl in a cage in the back of one of the cars. And then she needs to figure out who the kidnapper is, what she's gonna do about it, how to rescue this little girl. I love this so much. I was not expecting to really love it. This was also one of the first like mystery and or thriller type books that I've read, and that also stuck with me so much this year. I read it last January, so it's now been like a full calendar year since I read this book, and I still think about it very regularly, which does not happen with books a lot, because I read so many, like they're kind of in and out. Like, even if I really like a book, it doesn't always stick with me the way that this book has. And in mystery and thriller type books, I've decided not to purchase anymore, because normally it's the kind of book that I know that I'm only going to read once. But this book I can see myself rereading again and again for the thrill of it. And I was so surprised that it impressed me so much, and it was so exciting and riveting and good. Okay, my number 2 most surprising book of the year is probably going to surprise some of you, to know that it was a surprise to me that I liked it, because I ended up being obsessed with the series, and that is The Cruel Prince by Holly Black. So I thought I was gonna hate this book. I absolutely did. everyone was talking about it, and I was hearing people do reviews, but it sounded to me like such a boring, like basic YA fantasy. Like it didn't sound exciting or like something that I hadn't heard before. But the audiobook was like on sale or something on Audible, and I was like, okay, fine, whatever. I'm just gonna get it. Everyone has worn me down, I'm gonna do it. And I immediately fell in love, and I was like, oh, okay, I understand what everyone is talking about. I really thought that I was gonna hate this book, and it turns out I am obsessed with The Cruel Prince and The Wicked King and The Queen of Nothing and the whole series and like Holly Black's whole thing. I was just so surprised that this book was so good when I thought it was going to be like one of the worst things I had ever read. I was fully prepared to hate read this book, and I didn't. I loved it. What a nice surprise. All right, y'all, my number one most surprising book of 2019 was Pestilence by Laura Thalassa, which I've talked about. I talked about it in my December wrap up because I read it for the second time this year in December because I was rereading a lot of books. But when I first read it, it was a 5-star read, which like books with naked men on the cover are usually not that for me. I read them for like the fun and the escapism, but it's usually not like high literature. But I thought the storyline was really good. It is about this like post-apocalyptic world where the 4 horsemen are riding, and Pestilence is going around making people sick. So the main character, Sarah, when everyone else evacuates from her town, she volunteers to stay behind and kill Pestilence. But it doesn't work because he's immortal, which they should have known. Like, he's divine retribution from God for mankind's sins. He's probably not going to be so easily killed by a shotgun. But I digress. So instead of killing her, he takes her prisoner and forces her to like witness the death and destruction, which is bad and gross. But along the way, they start to get to know each other better, and eventually things happen. I don't want to talk about it too much, but I was very impressed by the mythology that Laura Thalassa set up. This whole Horsemen of the Apocalypse thing. Because I mean, it's not like she's the first person to ever do that. That's like a well-known thing. But the way that she did it was very interesting. And I remember when I first read it the first time, and I was reading the prologue, it was so well written, I literally had to stop reading it and be like, isn't this a self-published, like, smut book? Is that not what this is? It is much more plot-focused and relationship-focused than physical. Like, it is much more based on, like, the emotional intimacy than physical intimacy, which was a nice change of pace. And I didn't know that I was gonna like it that much. It was also one of the first, like, smutty books that I read. So maybe that is also why I liked it so much, because I didn't really have anything else to compare it to. And like I said, when I reread it, I did give it a 4-star rating instead of a 5. But that's still very good for this kind of book for me. And I don't know, it was just a very nice surprise for a book that I had extremely low expectations for. Okay, that was it. Those are my most surprising books of 2019. Let me know what you thought of any of these books if you have read them, especially if any of them surprised you as much as they surprised me. I like to know that I'm not the only one who has unrealistic expectations for books. Stay tuned next week where you will get my best and worst books of 2019, and there's not going to be any overlap between my disappointing and surprising books and then worst and best. So next week it's going to be all new books that I'm talking about. So if you're interested, like and subscribe so you can see those videos, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.